All right. Hello, everyone. Anyone who is watching. I've been really bored this beginning of the year, and I've been waiting for the anime awards to drop. So bored that I decided to go ahead and make predictions for each of the categories. And today I thought we'd start with the best protagonist. So, kind of how I'm going to do this is I was thinking of like, we're going to go not necessarily what I think was the best protagonist, but what I think will get nominated for best protagonist. So some characters I think are really good protagonists, but will probably be left off because they just weren't popular enough, or maybe they were maybe not appreciated by the large majority of the fandom. So we'll kind of go through, and we're gonna see who I think is best and worst protagonists. So let's start with Vanitas right here. Well, let's name these categories. So up here, we're gonna have top 6, and these are gonna be my nominees. Then under here we have highly likely, and this will be anything that I could also see being like a contender, someone who I could see being nominated. Possible is like it could happen, but it's not super likely. Unlikely is basically like I don't think these people would be nominated. And then never is like absolutely not. If it happens, I would riot. So let's start with an easy never. Where is it? Aha. Emma from Promised Neverland. Because this is season 2, Emma is not going to get nominated for best protagonist. It's never going to happen. You know it, I know it, we all know it. But let's start with one I do think will be nominated for the top 6. I'm going to put Rudius from Jobless Reincarnated, probably the best protagonist, easily. I guess I should say what I like about protagonist, or what I look for in what I would consider a good protagonist. I look for someone who's very proactive, is moving the plot. Usually they're typically very interesting, have a lot of layers. Rudius is a great protagonist. He's very proactive. We get inside his head a lot, which is fun because he has like 2 different personalities. He has his like cute kid body, but then in his head, he's this adult man. And that typically leads to some funny shenanigans and stuff. But yeah, he just kind of runs his show. And with the 2 core, I think it's very easy that he's going to get nominated. I will be very sad if he doesn't. But yeah, this is kind of like the scale we're going to expect, something between these 2. So we're going to start with Vanitas, and I'm going to put him in possible. I wouldn't say highly likely. I think the same can go for, I forget his name, but this other guy from the Vanitas anime. They were both fine. They're interesting enough, and they're fun and flashy. They have very memorable designs. Vanitas in particular has a really cool voice. But I just don't think there was enough for them to be highly considered. I'm going to do the same for the Sunny Boy protagonist. I don't remember his name. He was good, and I like what they did with his character, but I don't think he was present enough for me to consider him like a nominatable protagonist. Then we have Langa from Skate. I'm going to put Langa. I'll put him in possible, but really he's more like an unlikely. I just think he has more chance than some people that I'm going to put in unlikely. You know what? I'll go ahead and put him in unlikely. But Langa, he's fun, but he kind of gets outshined by Ricky over here, who I will put in at least highly likely. I may move him up, but Reki was a real show stealer. He has a really good character arc. He has a nice design. He has like one of the best scenes in the anime, in my opinion, with his skate against Adam. I just think he did a lot more than Longa did in the series, even though I think Longa had a better start. But we'll see. So then we have girl from '86. I can't remember her name. I'm gonna put her impossible. I think she was interesting. She had a lot of cool, like her mentality was very interesting in that she was very standout from her society, and she kind of does run the show, but then she's also not as present in the second half of the show, where Noizen, or I think that's his name, Undertaker, whatever his name is, he becomes a lot more prevalent. But I still don't think they have really enough to be considered. One is more present in the first half, one's more present in the second half. But they're both good, but not necessarily stand out. Then we have the protagonist from Platinum End. I'm going to go ahead and put him in. Yeah, I'll put him in never. He was very bland and basic, so I don't think he's very likely to get nominated. Was a popular anime. The writers of Death Note wrote it, but I just don't see it for Best Protagonist. We have Talked from Talked Up Destiny. I'm going to put it unlikely. I mean, there's a chance, but not a very high one. He was kind of boring too. He got very one note about just, I like music, I want to make music. I don't think that's very likely to get nominated. Here we have the lead from Quintessential Quintuplets, I think. This is a never. There's no way he's getting nominated. He's a little too... He's more interesting than most harem protagonists, but he's not interesting enough that I think he'd get nominated. Plus, this is the season 2. I just don't see it. There's nothing. Yeah, also, automatically, never. Toru from Dragon Maid. It's arguable if she's the protagonist. I'm going to say unlikely. There wasn't enough really to make her stand out, and it's a second season. Same goes for Kobayashi. They're both great as protagonists and characters, but they're not going to get nominated. Otokawa, I will put top 6. I think he was a very interesting protagonist. He has like a really interesting development toward the end of the series. He's very influential to the main plot of the series. And he's very unique, especially the further in you get, the more you realize how interesting Otokawa's like psychology is. So I think he's very likely, probably top 6. I think Odd Taxi is going to get a lot of nominations, so I'm prepared for that. Toru, I'm going to put in highly likely. I think it's kind of hard because she did get nominated a previous year, and it is another season, but it is the final season, so she might get nominated. Fruits Basket was really praised this year, so I think it's very likely that she'll get nominated. And I'm going to put both the Horimiya protags in highly likely. They're both very entertaining and fun. I think the biggest thing that keeps me from really considering them is that they both kind of shared the protagonist spotlight. And for me, that's a big red flag of they're probably not going to get nominated. This is the guy from that one anime. I'd say very unlikely. He was outshined by his female lead, the teenage girl. I can't even call his name or the name of the show, so that says a lot. I didn't watch this series, but it was recommended by the one of the anime award polls, and I don't think it's going to happen. I guess I'll put it unlikely because I don't actually know the character, but it was from some death game this summer, and so I was surprised that it got a call out, but I decided to go ahead and put it just in case. This is the protagonist from Komi. I think it was like Tanda or something. Anyways, I think it's very unlikely because he was really focused on as like the support character. He wasn't the focus, and he's very basic. He's kind of the audience stand-in, and I think those typically don't lead to really good protagonist. We have the dude from Tokyo Revengers, who I'm blanking on his name right now. But I'm gonna put him. I guess I'll put him in possible. It's possible he could get nominated. He is proactive. He is trying to do stuff. I just think he was a little obnoxious in how he did things. Sometimes he was more. He'd mess up a lot and like kind of take two steps back whenever he takes a step forward, and so you get kind of frustrated with him. So I don't think it's likely, but I do think it's possible that he could get nominated. Blue Period, I really liked this character. Um, I can't think of his name. It starts with a Y, I think. I'm really bad with names if you can't tell. But he was very interesting. His psychology, the idea of like ambition and the drive to want to achieve something in life was really interesting and inspiring. And he really goes through the ropes and he learns a lot from his peers and from the art itself. He's from Blue Period, which is a painting anime. So I think it's very likely he could get nominated. Um, but I don't know if he's necessarily top six. But if he gets nominated, I would not be disappointed. Aaron Jaeger, I'm gonna put in top six. The only thing that makes me hesitant about him being a top six contender is just the fact that, you know, Attack on Titan's been around the block. It's already a popular anime, and Crunchyroll's a little hesitant to nominate animes that have already aired before for awards like this. But I think Aaron did enough this season to really warrant it, because previous seasons Aaron wouldn't be considered a standout protagonist, but with the final season, he was really a show stealer. I think he deserves a nomination. We'll see if the awards agree with me. So here we have the spider from So I'm the Spider, So What? I want to put highly likely because I think this character is really fun and entertaining. Probably one of the most entertaining perspectives we get outside of Rudius. But I also know that this character was not seen much because the anime it's from was kind of awful with its CG and animation. So I could see a lot of people skipping this, and so it probably wouldn't get as many nominations as some of these other series might. So I'm putting in highly likely, but not necessarily a top six. Joe from Megalo Box, I'm putting in possible. Had one of the best comeback of a character besides maybe Aaron this year. Was super interesting, but at the same time, not a lot of people watch this one, so I don't think it's highly likely, but it's quite possible that Joe could get nominated. He's been nominated before for Best Protagonist, and I think Best Boy, which I think was a weird choice in 2018, but that was a previous year. Rimuru, I'm also putting impossible. Rimuru had a really great growth this year, was really interesting. Enough that I think he stands out from some of the bunch of sequels we've had this year. So I think it's possible, but not necessarily likely. I would be very surprised if Rimuru got nominated, but I wouldn't be upset about it. Legoshi is kind of in a similar boat. Amazing second season. I don't think he was as standout as he was in the first season, so I don't think he'd get nominated. But if he did, I'd be okay with it. He did get snubbed in the 2020 awards, so maybe they'll try to remedy it like the Oscars do and nominate him now. Meliodas is a never. Seven Deadly Sins has been a sinking ship for years now. It's not going to get nominated. Deku, I'm going to put in never. I don't think there's really much going for Deku this season. This season was a little underwhelming because the anime started not following the manga, started cutting corners. The animation wasn't as good. It wasn't super Deku focused for certain sections, and I don't see it this year. I don't think he's done enough to really warrant it. And I'm a big My Hero fan, but I don't think it's going to happen. But I will put Boji from Ranking of the King in top 6. Boji was a very interesting character, being deaf, so like unable to speak. He's literally physically weak, but yet he wants to be a king, and that kind of they don't play that for like laughs or like for like a joke. They play it very seriously, make him very endearing and likable. Probably one of the most likable characters this year. Um, the Ranking of the King kind of surprised a lot of people, I think, because a lot of people didn't see it coming unless you just are a big Wit Studio fan. I don't think a lot of people saw this being the peak of anime this year, but it turned out really good. And so I really expect Boji to get nominated. I'd be kind of sad if he doesn't, but this was a really tough year. And so any of the highly likelies would not be disappointed if they ended up putting instead of Boji. Senku, I'm putting in unlikely. I didn't hear a lot of people talking about Dr. Stone season 2, so I don't think it's going to get as much focus. The winter season in particular was so stacked that I don't think it's going to happen. We have I'm blanking on the name, Fushi from To Your Eternity. I'm going to put in top 6, but I may have to drop Fushi. Fushi was really proactive, really fun. Had an interesting abilities and interesting psychology of doubt and feeling guilt over causing his friends' deaths and stuff, and always being surrounded by death. And Fushi also had this kind of growing from not being able to talk or speak or communicate to being a fully fleshed out person by the final arcs. A lot of interesting growth. I think it's quite possible Fushi could get nominated. Probably very likely, in fact. Then we have the protagonist from the Nagato anime. I'm going to put in unlikely. He was pretty unlikable. Not unlikable, but he's so passive and kind of forgettable compared to Nagatoro that I just don't see it. Subaru, I'm going to put in possible, I guess. I think it's very unlikely. Subaru has been nominated previously, I believe, for awards like this, or at least he's gotten voice acting awards. I don't think there was enough with this second half, especially since it was very Amelia focused, for Subaru to get nominated, especially since he didn't even get nominated in 2020, which would have been a more likely year for him to get nominated. So I say it's probably very unlikely that he's going to get it, but I'll put him in possible because I don't think it's unquestioning that he's not going to get nominated. We have Otto I from Wonder Egg, and I'm putting in highly likely. Wonder Egg, I think if it had a better ending, would have been a big contender for basically all categories. But I do kind of wonder if it's going to get kind of what happened with Darling in the Franxx in 2018, where the anime did a lot of really good stuff, but because the ending was awful, a lot of people didn't nominate it for stuff. And so I think it only got 2 awards, not even Best Girl for 02. So it was kind of odd how it missed out on stuff. And I think that might happen with Wonder Egg. I think Wonder Egg is a big lead in like animation and character design and Best Girl and a lot of different things. But I think because it ended up being so all right by the end, and there were other animes that were really good this year, I think it might not get as many nominations as it probably would deserve. Part of me wants to put Otto in top 6, but I don't think it's quite possible. And we'll get into that because I'm going to put Vivi for the last of the top 6. I think Vivi was a very interesting protagonist. We got to see a lot of different sides to her over the generation. She had arguably different personalities depending on which time era we're in. Uh, and she's very proactive, does a lot of cool stuff for the narrative. I think it's very likely she'll get nominated. Then we have Jolene. I'm going to put Jolene in possible, maybe highly likely. My big concern about putting Jolene in highly likely is I think they'll save Jolene for next year because, I mean, we don't necessarily have most of her story. She's a very good protagonist, and I'm very intrigued to see where she goes. But I think just because this is so early in the story, I don't think she'll get nominated this year. I think next year, it's very likely that she'll get nominated. But this year, I say unlikely. Tanjiro, I'm putting in unlikely. I don't think he did enough this last year, to be nominated. Maybe next year. I guess we'll see where the story goes, but I think this is a very good placement for him. This is the girl from My Senpai's Annoying. I'm gonna say possible, but really it's more like unlikely. She was fun, but I was way more invested in the secondary romance characters. And she's kind of a stock character that we've seen a lot before, where she doesn't want to be treated like a child, but even though she looks like a child. And yeah, it's good. I wouldn't say it was stand out enough for it to be nominated. I think I needed a little more focus on her for me to consider her for a top contender. Mirko-chan, I think, is the name. I didn't watch this. I watched the first episode, and then the Funimation subtitles glitched out on me, so I was never able to finish. She was fine. I didn't love her, but I've seen a lot of people really like her, so I'm going to put her at least in highly likely, mostly out of ignorance, in that I really don't know on this one. And then the guy from the Assassin Isekai one, I'm going to put impossible. I didn't see that one either, unfortunately, but I did hear a lot of people talking about this character, and so I thought I should at least put him in the runnings. From what I've heard, he sounds very interesting, at least for an isekai perspective. I just have trouble imagining him being more interesting than some of these up here. So I put him in possible. But we will see. So this is my list. I think this is pretty solid. These two are the ones I'm a little iffier about, and I feel like someone like the guy from Blue Period, Spider, either of these two, like really it could go a lot of, I guess Hori probably is more impossible, while I'd say Miyamura has more likely of a chance. So this is probably more likely. Let's see if we can order this a bit. I would say something like that. And then something like that. These I don't care as much about ordering, but something like this is probably what we're expected to see for Best Protagonist. But if I missed anyone, just let me know in the comments. We will start a different tier list now. We're going to go to Best Anime Antagonist. Okay, and I'm going to clear this before you guys see all of my answers. So here we got top 6. Here we have highly likely, possible, unlikely, and never. So let's start with top 6. Let's find someone I think is pretty obvious pick. I think Adam from Skate the Infinity is probably one of the best this year as far as like a more secondary series. So I think this is probably like one of the most expected characters. I'd be very surprised if Adam doesn't get a nomination, but we'll see what happens. For Never, I'm gonna put Seven Deadly Sins. Very unlikely. I think there's another one, isn't there? I guess I didn't put the other brother. So very unlikely. I would also put Peter Ratchery and Never. I don't see either of those getting nominated, mostly because the animes they're from weren't super well received. We have this guy from Tokyo Revengers, and I'm going to say unlikely just because there are other Tokyo Revengers villains that were more interesting and more likely. Let's go ahead and do that. So I'd put this guy in highly likely, and I'd put Banana Hair in top 6. He had a more interesting motivation, even though it was kind of flimsy in a campy way, but I think it worked for the kind of character he was, to be like so hung up on this slight he saw, even if the slight was really about himself. And I thought that was very interesting. Tokyo Revengers is really popular this year, so I think it's quite likely that he'll get nominated, but I don't think it's necessarily the best possible. I'm going to put the girl from the Spider Demon Girl. Impossible. She was fun, but again, not many people saw that anime, so I don't think it's very likely. I also don't think she was very motivated, and we didn't get much of her, so I don't think it's very likely. It's more like unlikely. The guy from both the people from Dr. Stone, I'm going to put in unlikely. I don't think they did enough to really make an impact this year, so I don't think it's very likely that they get nominated. Twice from My Hero. I'm going to put Impossible. Same with Toga. They had focus, and they had a good little character episode, but I don't think they're very likely to get nominated just because they weren't the main villain. And the more screen time and presence you have, the more likely I think you'd get nominated for this kind of award. But Shigaraki, I'm going to put tentatively in top 6. We'll see if Shigaraki stays. My Hero was really weak this year, but I do think My Hero always really excels with its antagonist. This year was no exception. The only thing is that arc that really focused on him was chopped down to 5 episodes, which was very unfortunate because it's one of the better arcs in the manga, but it is what it is. And so we got what we got. So I don't know if a lot of people will nominate him just because of that, but I think My Hero is popular enough that this one category, they actually probably do have a chance. I'm going to put, I think it's like Tonako, I don't remember. This crazy psychotic raccoon from Odd Taxi probably is very likely. I think there's another antagonist that's more likely, and we'll get to those antagonists, but he was quite fun, so I think he's very likely. I'm going to say possible for the Platinum Men protagonist. He was threatening, but Platinum Men didn't really do as well as I think a lot of people thought it would, so I don't think it's super likely, but it's a little more likely than some. Echidna, I'm going to say possible because I think in the second season she wasn't as present as she was in the first one, so I don't think she'd get as much recognition. She already has been nominated, so I think that also puts her at a disadvantage for getting nominated this year. But we do have the clown guy that I cannot think of his name, Roswell. And Roswell was very interesting and had a more interesting thing going on. So I'm going to put him in highly likely, more so than some of these others. Yato from Odd Taxi, I'm putting in top 6. Just a very fun villain that a lot of people gravitated to. Like I said, I think Odd Taxi is going to get a lot of nominations this year. So I think top 6 is fair. Reiner, I'm going to put highly likely The only thing is that Reiner wasn't super present in this first half of the season, but when he was, we got a great backstory for him. He had a lot of people changing their minds about him and becoming a lot more invested in him and his story and the side of Marley. So I think it's very likely that he could get nominated. I'll put Zeke in possible and Gabby. Actually, I'll put Gabby in highly likely just because Gabby's been very like hated over the last year, and that she's kind of become a meme of how much we dislike Gabby. So I think we'll put Gabby in highly likely. Kazai, I think is his name. I'm gonna put top 6, but I'm also tempted to put in highly likely. I think I'll put highly likely, and I'll move back to top 6 if I'm still feeling it. Just because of the movie, it makes it complicated to know if he's really going to count. But then there was the TV show later, so technically he does count for the protagonist spot. But it is complicated if he really counts or not. So that makes me want to put him in highly likely, but he's definitely probably top 6 material. He was very fun and threatening. I think it's like Inmu or whatever. Not as memorable. I don't really remember anything about this character, so I'm going to put in possible. Then over here, we have a Beastar's character. I'm going to say possible, but not necessarily likely. Just more of a minor antagonist in a sense. I don't want to go into too much details because kind of some low-key Beastar spoilers, but it is what it is. We have this chick from To Your Eternity who's very hateable, very unlikable, but I don't know if she had enough presence to quite be top 6, but we'll see once all the cards are down. Mahito, I'd say possible. I think Mahito had a better chance last year and got beat out by Sukuna, who I'm also going to put in possible. Geto, I'm going to put in unlikely. But they're still very likely. Jujutsu Kaisen was really popular. I think because Sukuna won last year, he's not going to get nominated. And Mahito, I think, was more interesting in the first half of the season rather than the second half. So I think both these are possible, but not necessarily likely. Then we have the antagonist from Jobless Reincarnated. I think he's likely, but he was so not around for most of the series. I'm kind of thinking about highly likely. Still a very good protagonist, was around a lot, very, very interesting. When he did show up, he had such an impact that I could definitely see him being nominated. We have the king from Ranking of the Kings. Not going to go too much into this character. It's a little bit spoilery, but a very interesting antagonist. Has an interesting relationship in many ways to the protagonist. And I don't want to say anything because it's a big spoiler, and I really like Ranking of the King and recommend people watch it if they aren't. But I think it's very likely, but not necessarily super likely. Same with the monkey from Odd Taxi. I really should have looked up all these names before I did this list. But he's very threatening. I think he was actually a more interesting character than Yato, but I know Yato is more popular. I would personally, if I was in charge of this list, I'd do that. But I'm not in charge of this list. So I go with this. Overall, really Odd Taxi, you can't go wrong with whichever antagonist you pick. There are multiple characters who kind of fit an antagonistic role, so I think it kind of works out. I'm going to put unlikely for this guy from Reincarnated as a Slime. He was kind of built up throughout the first 2 seasons, and then his fight, he was kind of pathetic and unmemorable. So, like, I don't think he's very likely to get nominated. And yeah, I didn't even put the other guy who's probably going to be the main antagonist of the whole series. But yeah, I didn't watch either of these series. I didn't watch Eden Zero, and I didn't watch Shaman King. So I'm putting both these impossible because I could see it happening, but I didn't hear a lot of buzz around either of these two. I threw them in here because I was just kind of looking for who were antagonists this year, because there weren't as many as you'd think there would be. A lot of slice of life or shows that just didn't have a clear antagonist. Here we have Poochie, who I'm going to put impossible. And even though I think Poochie has potential to be a top tier antagonist, I think that's mostly going to be for next year. He didn't do a lot in this first part of the season, but I think next year he's probably a top 6 contender. So I fully expect him to be in the runnings next year. Ooh, and then we have a bunch of people from Talked, which I'm putting in unlikely. There's a lot of different types of antagonists, but their motivations were very unclear and lukewarm. And then these two were just really cool aesthetically, but not necessarily interesting as a character. So I don't think it's very likely that any of them will get nominated. And then we have the girl from One Direct Priority, who I also think is unlikely, just because that leaves a bitter taste in the mouth of all the people who kind of were hoping One Direct would be really great, and it wasn't. So let's move up to, I think if I had to pick 2 out of this list, probably be Kazai and Reiner. And I think that's a pretty solid top 6 this year. But really, any of these I'm okay with. These would be more surprising. But yeah, that's best antagonist. Okay. So this is a big list. So we're going to do top 6. Highly likely, possible, unlikely, never. So I'm going to put Sheen in possible. I wouldn't really call him a best boy, but he's not unlikable. So I could see him getting nominated. He was very prevalent in the series, but I don't think it's very likely. Garfield, I'm putting in unlikely. He's not really a best boy. He's the loud, violent one, as you'd expect from Bakugo's voice actor. This guy from Horimiya, I think, is very unlikely. I don't remember much about him, but I put him here. I put anyone who had like 100 favorites on my anime list, but I don't think there was enough of him to be a potential. Also unlikely. Gother, I would say, is probably a never, honestly. There wasn't a lot for Gother this season. I guess really it's probably like that, but Deku's probably a never. Just because Deku's been nominated for this award so many times that I think people are just sick of seeing him in this award. And again, he wasn't as present as previous seasons. I would be kind of upset if he shows up again for Best Boy. So I'm putting him there. I hope that Crunchyroll doesn't put Deku again, because they'll just increase the hate for my hero. Here we have the guy from Sunny Boy. I put possible, not necessarily someone I'd call a best boy, but he was interesting. This person seems a little more best boy like. The guy from Vanitas. I could see it. I don't think it's very likely. Tadano, I think, from Komi, I'm putting impossible. I don't think it's super likely, but it's not impossible. Otto, I'm putting in highly likely. just because Otto had a lot of good moments, but I don't remember if that was from the first half of season 2 or the second half of season 2. So I don't know what year a lot of his best moments were from, but I think it was from the second half. So I think it's possible he could be best boy, but I don't think he's one of the most likely. Yuki, I think is possible. I don't think it's likely, but I could see Yuki getting nominated. Takt, I think is unlikely. Like I said, he gets kind of one note. Is voiced by Uchiyama, so that's something. We have Joe. I'd say Joe's possible, not super likely. There was better people in skate, like Reki, who I will say probably is going to be a best boy contender. And then I'm gonna put also possible, not super likely. I think Reki is a clear choice for Skate the Infinity, enough that I'm going to put other characters in different sections, but not necessarily like a clear sweep or anything. King, I would say, is a never. Crom, I'd say, is a never. Miyamura probably is a top 6 contender. A lot of people really like that character. Definitely a best boy potential. People like the shy boy, so I get that. The bear from BB. Gosh, I'm blanking on all these names right now. But he is very likely, I think. He was very fun. He had a lot of personality. I could see him being nominated. It was a very popular show. Nope. The little boy from Horimiya is very unlikely. Todoroki, I would say, is a never. Vanitas, I'd say highly likely, but not necessarily maybe there. He's more of a pretty boy, and so I could see him being nominated for best boy, but I don't know. Best boy for me has more of like a connotation of like, not necessarily like the husbando, but I don't know. Maybe some people might see it that way. I don't think either of them are very likely to make it, but we'll see. No. I'd say possible, but not likely. Shinso had more presence this year, but I put in never. No. Armin, I'm going to say unlikely. I don't think it's impossible for Armin to get nominated, but I don't think there was enough. Unlikely. Otokawa, I don't know. He's more of an interesting protagonist, but not necessarily a best boy. So I'm putting him possible. I did really like what they did with Veldora. So maybe he'll get nominated. This is more likely than some, but probably it's more like a possible. Rudius is very unlikely for best boy because while Rudius is a good protagonist, he's not necessarily likable at all moments. So I don't think people are going to be like, ooh, man, Rudius is best boy. So I think it's very unlikely. Maybe I guess possible just because this show is popular, but really he's more unlikely than not. Norman, I'd say very unlikely. Same with Ray. Both are good characters. Both are good boys. But Promise Neverland kind of sank. Guy from Dragon Maid, I'd say is unlikely. Keep our boys together. I think this is very likely for those who watch Blue Period. We'll see what happens. Twice, I'd say, is possible. Falco is possible, maybe highly likely. He was a very good boy, but I don't think a lot of people are going to think to nominate Falco, so I'm not putting him that high. Luis is possible. I think very likely for our shape-shifting best boy. Gabuto, I would say, is unlikely. Pina is possible. Lucifer is possible. Kyo I'd put in highly likely. We'll see what we have, and then we'll move people up. Rimuru, possible, not necessarily highly likely, but definitely did a lot this year. Possible, not necessarily super likely. The Shadow, possible, not as likely as other characters from Ranking of the King. Unlikely, but I'd like it if Hori's dad was nominated. Legoshi's possible. No, there we go. Mikey is probably a top 6. This boy was super popular. It kind of made Tokyo Revengers as popular as it was. So I think it's very likely Mikey can get nominated. Bakugo, I'm going to say never. Subaru, unlikely. Bon, never. Boji, I think, is a top 6 contender. Very good boy. Definitely fits the best boy category. I'd probably put him like up here. This is probably how I'd rank them. There we go. It's going to be a tough year though for both of these categories. Unlikely. It's funny that he's an antagonist, but he's also so likely for best boy. I'd say possible. Gulu I would put top 6, maybe have to move to highly likely. This is the tough contender because I feel like also very good contenders are right here. Unlikely, possible. He was pretty fun. A lot of people liked him. Draken I'd say is very likely. I think he just gets outshined by Mikey, but otherwise he was very popular. If he was in his own unique show, I think he'd be nominated. But because Mikey exists, I don't know. I don't think it's possible. I'd say possible. There's a lot of odd taxi characters who are good, but not necessarily like outstanding. So these are a couple characters that I haven't seen. So let's get some of those out of the way. So I don't really know how good or bad they are as far as a best boy nomination. But they were popular enough that I thought I should at least recognize them for who or what they are. So yeah, these are all here out of ignorance. They could go up, they could go down. I just really don't know. I didn't hear a lot of buzz about them, so I'm not banking on it. But I saw them nominated for other anime award categories that were like Best Boy, Best Supporting Boy, that kind of thing. So I put them on this list. Then right here we have I put him in possible. The guy from the I Shaved and Took Home a High School Runaway or whatever it's called. I think it's like Higanai. I don't know, but he's possible, but not necessarily super likely. Levi, I would say, is unlikely, not because he's not a popular character, but just because I don't know. Again, too many anime characters. I don't think he'd be nominated for Best Boy, but he did get nominated for other award categories, so I put him. We have the rabbit boy from Fruits Basket. I can't think of his name. Momiji. I want to put him highly likely, but really it's probably possible. It's possible. I don't see it happening, but it could happen. Possible. I'd say unlikely, but maybe. I only put him on this list because he was nominated for another thing. Possible or unlikely. Possible. Tanjiro is probably unlikely. This guy from My Senpai is Annoying. I think he's very unlikely to get nominated for Best Boy. I didn't put Kazuma from My Senpai's Annoying, who actually is kind of fun and interesting, but I don't think he'd be nominated either way. And then the two guys from Blue Period, don't think they're very likely to get nominated. And yeah, so that's my list. Here we have the top 6. I feel like this is pretty solid. If I had to pick anyone who probably isn't likely to make it, it's Gugu right here. Had a really strong presence, but I don't know if everyone got that far. I could see any of these guys potentially replacing, but I think this is a pretty solid set, and I'd be very surprised to see anyone else not from these two top categories be nominated. Let's move on to Best Girl, category everyone wants to talk about. Okay, I did accidentally make some duplicates on this one, and you can kind of see them right here and right here. So ignore that. And I also had one mistake that we'll talk about. But I made this list pretty early on, so Blue Period kind of threw me for a loop with who I thought would be a Best Girl contender. Turned out isn't that clear cut, and we'll talk about it. Never. All right, so let's start with this girl. I think it's unlikely because there's the other girl from the same show, and I think she was. I've heard more people talk about her than this girl from the Vanitas anime. I only watched like half of that before I got kind of bored and dropped it. I need to get back into it at some point, but I have a very loud cat. So we'll see what happens, but I don't think that's very likely. I'm gonna say possible for the girl from Tokyo Revengers. She was interesting, but she wasn't like the most interesting protagonist of them. We have the Quints. Let's just go through those really quick. So I'd say unlikely. I would say more likely is Miku and Nino. I would say are in the highly likely. And then where are the other two? Yotsuba, possible. One second. So Yotsuba we have impossible. Itsuki we have impossible. These two I hear a lot of people talk about. Very likely they could get nominated. Biggest problem, again, a sequel, not the first season. And also because there's two girls that are really good contenders, I think they'll end up knocking each other out, and they probably will stop either of them from getting nominated rather than one of them getting nominated, which is unfortunate. I think this girl, very likely, from 86. I'd say it's unlikely, very unlikely. I'd say never. Okay, so here we're going to make another category because I messed up. Add row below. Oops. Oh gosh, how do you spell oops? Oops. Yep. Oops. Quick decision making. So this character from Blue Period, it's complicated what to define her as. She calls herself a crossdresser sometimes, but she also seems to identify as a girl, which would, if you identify as a girl, I think you could still be considered best girl. But because it's not ever clear how this character identifies. If they identify as male but just like being feminine, it's hard to decide what category she belongs in. So really, I wouldn't nominate her or Najime from Komi. Both of those two are a little too complicated about what their gender is to really nominate them for best boy or best girl. I wish it was a little more clear cut how they personally identify. So I can't really rank either of them. I don't think either of them would have been very likely, but yeah, that was a big oopsie on my part. I made this list very early on into that season. I think there's like 2 episodes out, and then episode 3 they have that big reveal, and I was like, oh, well, I call me a fool. Deanne, I would say, is probably not going to get nominated. It's too late in the show. Same with Elizabeth. We have Yuki, I would say possible, maybe not necessarily highly likely, but she had a very nice little arc in the series. Over here we have Sasha. I'll say possible just because a lot of people got really invested in her again after certain events in the anime. Mikasa, I would say I want to say unlikely, but she is very popular. It was the most popular anime this year. So we'll see. This girl, I would say unlikely. Gosh, my brain is going crazy and I can't come up with anyone's name. I literally said it earlier this stream. I think unlikely. Same with Kobayashi. Unlikely. Both are fun, but I don't think they did enough this year. Amelia, I'll at least put possible. She had a more focus this year. I guess I'll put highly likely. She had a more focus this year, so I guess I could see her being nominated. But we'll see. Echidna, I think, is unlikely. Unlikely. Let's get some of these unlikelies out of the way. Not likely. Not likely. Not likely. Not likely. Very unlikely. Okay, we'll go back. Tori, I will put in top 6. I think she was a standout for this year. People really liked Horimiya. I think it's very likely she'll get nominated. This girl from Sunny Girl, I think is unlikely. 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 Toru, I'll put in highly likely. Say possible, but really is more like unlikely. Just because there are better people from Wonder Egg, but it was an interesting character. I could see a lot of people really liking that character. I'd say unlikely. Unlikely because Haru didn't get nearly as much focus as season 1. Unlikely. There's a lot of unlikely. There's a lot of girls. There are more girls than there are guys. I'm going to say possible for Little Spider. She was very fun. She had a very fun vocal performance that made her very likable. Again, it just comes down to Song Aspire So What was not a very popular anime, so that keeps me from expecting it. I'd say possible. She was more likable than some of the other Horimiya characters, in my opinion. Unlikely. Well, I guess possible. She was a really popular waifu for like 1 episode before her show kind of self-imploded. So I remember she was very popular. So I guess I'll put her in possible. Eris. I will put Eris in top 6. For me, she was a top 6. I know a lot of people found her a little annoying, especially early on. So it makes it kind of complicated to put her as a top 6, but I think she was definitely the standout of the year. So I put her top 6. This girl, I would say maybe top 6, maybe highly possible. She had a very interesting story. The show she's from is kind of a showcase of her as a character and her trauma and stuff. So I think she's quite possible. I know a lot of people really vibed with her. Okay, we got Roxy. I think Roxy is possible because I've seen a lot of people really stan Roxy, but she also is so absent from the show that it's kind of hard for me to put her much higher than just possible. But I know a lot of people really liked Roxy. Kano, I guess I'll say possible just because she's more likely than not, just because she's such a memed best girl in the cute child way, not in a waifu way. But Toga, I think it's possible, but not necessarily likely. Unlikely. Komi, I would put top 6. Komi, like even before the anime came out, Komi was probably a big contender for best girl just off of the show. She's very cutesy. Wouldn't be one of my personal favorite best girls, but I can see a lot of why people would like her. She has a lot of cute reaction faces and stuff. Rika, see, I want to put Rika top 6, but I'm going to put her in highly likely just because I know Wonder Egg was kind of mixed reception. She was definitely my favorite of the Wonder Egg girls. Ness, I'm going to put possible. She was very fun and cute, but again, Platinum Int, not a lot of people ended up liking it too much, so I don't think it's very likely, but she was very cute. Ochako, I would say unlikely. She was cute. She was fun from Sunny Boy. Not super likely. I don't think a lot of people were really talking about the Sunny Boy characters. As a show, it might get a couple nominations, but I don't know if the characters necessarily were standout enough for most people. But I could be proven wrong. Unlikely. Destiny, I would say possible. Not highly likely, but she definitely feels like a best girl type. I just think she was a little flat. I guess I should put her here because she was probably the best thing about her show, but I don't know if she'd be strong enough to really be a top 6 contender. Otto, I would also put in a highly possible, but not necessarily top 6 for similar reasons to Rika. I think Rika, for me, would be more top 6. Again, this could be another Miku and Nino thing where the two of them being such high contenders, they'll knock each other out of the runnings. But we'll see what happens. Emma is never. Vivi, I would say probably top 6, if not highly possible. Milam, unlikely. Yeah. The Sheep Girl, unlikely. Ghislaine. Ghislaine's kind of complicated. I'd say possible, but even then, I know a lot of people like her because she's a big, muscly woman, and like, who doesn't like a big, muscly woman? But she also isn't super present in the show, which I think kind of detracts from her likeliness of being nominated. But there might be enough people who like her. Okay, so here we have some characters that I'm going to put impossible because I don't really know because I didn't watch these. So we'll put all of you. Yeah. You. And you. I'm putting impossible just because I did not see these shows, so I don't really know where they would land. But they quite well are probably an unlikely or possible. I've heard a lot of people talk up this girl, but I don't personally know myself, so I can't really comment on those. From 86, I'd say unlikely. Hanji is unlikely. Katarina, I'd say, is unlikely. This is her second season. So let's do some oopsies. Those are dupes. Jolene is possible. Again, I think she'll be saved for next year. She was fun, but I don't think she's someone people would consider a best girl. She's a very good protagonist and good character, but I don't think a lot of people are like, ooh, Jolene Cujo, best girl. We have the girl from the Senpai anime. I'm putting impossible, not super likely, but I will put Sakurai in highly possible because I started watching the show because of how many people were talking about her and how much fun she was. So she's kind of like an underrated waifu, which kind of makes me think she probably still won't get nominated just because the series wasn't super watched, but I think she's more likely than not. And then this girl, I would say, is possible, but not necessarily super likely. Yeah. And we have Mirko or something like that. I also didn't see this one, but again, I heard enough positive things to think she's possible, like more possible than some characters. I usually try to watch the really popular shows, but I had some issues with this show, so I wasn't able to watch it. And then there's some other characters from that show, which I'm going to put in unlikely. Then we had some more characters from Talked. I'm going to say possible, but not super likely. These two were really fun, but again, I think Destiny has the most likely chance, and even still, I don't think it's top 6. The girl from Platinum End, I mean, she's kind of cute, but she's so flat that I don't think it's likely. Girl from Blue Period, also unlikely. Nagatoro, though, I would put at least highly likely, but I'll probably put top 6 for now. Which means, it's so hard. This is a tough year. Foo Fighters, possible. She's very fun. I don't think she's super likely. And Hermes, I'd put in unlikely. But let's see. Who do I move up? I guess out of these, either move either Otto, Rika, it's so hard. It could be any of those, honestly. I'm gonna say Rika just because that's where my heart is at. But really, that last spot is pretty hard. Even Nagatoro, I'm not even certain on. I'm honestly not even sure if Eris will get the nomination, unfortunately. But Komi, I feel like Komi and Hori, I feel like are guaranteed. Very likely, something like this is a very likely chance. But this was a tough year. A lot of good girls. Not a lot of like super standout. Oh man, this is definitely the people who are going to get the nomination. All right. Let's see. Best couple. Oh gosh, this is so many categories. Okay, let's reset this. So at first I was like, oh, there weren't a lot of couples this year. But then I kind of looked more into it and I'm like, oh, there were a lot of couples this year. A lot more than previous years. So let's get the quints out of the way because that's a lot of them. I'd say you guys know the categories at this point. I'd say it's possible for these two. No, not that one. Oh, where is it? It was hard to find pictures of two characters in the same shot. We'll do the exact same thing that we did with the Best Girl nominees. Again, because Futuro is kind of bland, it really relies on the girls to really push that ship. I'd put Kyo and Toru very high, top 6 for me. Same with Hori and Izuya Miyamura. I don't remember his name. I'm terrible with names again, so sorry for that. Then we have the Komi. I think I'll put an A for now. Might move up to S. Not happening. I will put Reki and Langa. Never was canonized, but I mean, I think most people recognize it as more or less being canon. I'll put Joe and Cherry in B. I don't think it's quite as likely, but could happen. I think it's unlikely. These two didn't really have a lot of chemistry. They just kind of showed up. Same with these two. But, I mean, Tokyo Revengers was popular, so it could theoretically get the nomination. It's kind of confusing if this year we're going to even have a best couple or if the best romance, that is the new category name, means that it's going to be romance anime. So I'm going to be doing both. But as far as best couple, this is kind of where I'm looking at. Agoshi and Haru is B. I'd say B. Unfortunately, this is an interesting one because like Crunchyroll always wants to have some kind of LGBTQ representation, but I personally would rather them do Reki and Manga if they're going to do that. This was like a 1-episode thing, so I don't see it really happening, but we could potentially see it. Gabby and Falco, I'd say is fairly unlikely. Same with Toru and Kobayashi. I'd say those are pretty safe. These are all like good, but not necessarily stand out. Oh, I love these two, but I don't know if everyone's seen that series. They're all right. I didn't watch enough of this one, but I'm going to put them there. Yeah, it's possible. And then these two I didn't watch. But I think these are actual romance animes. So I'm putting them in highly likely. Oof. If I had to pick 3 of these to represent. Sorry. If I had to pick 3 of these, I guess I would pick. This is one of my favorites. It'd probably be really like that. Maybe like this. It's tough. These two are more secondary plot lines, but they were very fleshed out. This one is more of a focus, but I find him kind of bland. I'm shooting in the dark, but I've heard a lot of good things about this. So yeah, that's what I got. Not super. I'm only sure about these two. This one probably, and the rest it's kind of up in the air. It's probably somewhere in this category. But this might be why they're moving away from best couple, is just because it's hard to really define a good couple, and a lot of animes don't necessarily have good couples. So that might be why they're moving toward romance as a genre, which I think is okay. They'll be good. And we'll get into those if that ends up being the case. Best anime fights. Again, this one I had trouble with some pictures. So we'll see what happens. Again, you know the categories. I'm not going to deal with those. So I included things like boxing matches and skateboarding from Skate the Infinity. But arguably some of those aren't actually fights. But I'll put this in likely, but not necessarily super high. Let's put this one in S tier. So this is Rengoku versus Akazai, I think. Very likely. Let's get some of the obvious, very likely ones. So this is the Bloody Halloween fight. And then this the Kobayashi Toru versus I don't remember her name, Alma. This was like this as far as animation. Maybe here. Like these two are really good. So those two are very likely. So I'm gonna go ahead and just put those. I think those 3 fights are probably in a league of their own. Yeah, I don't really see much else. I will put Warhammer Titan versus Eren, just because Attack on Titan was so big this year. I will put this fight from Jobless Reincarnation. It's very good. This one, not as likely. Black Clover in general is possible, but not super likely. Black Clover has been snubbed like every single year. I don't think this is going to be the year that changes it. Same with One Piece. I'm putting anything that could be considered a One Piece fight in possible, but not. I'm putting in unlikely. This should be unlikely, mostly just because big shonen series kind of get snubbed in this category. Just because, like, I don't think a lot of the people that are judges are watching these. I'm putting that fight never. So yeah, I grabbed a bunch of different things. I don't even know because I'm not caught up with One Piece right now, so I'm not even sure if these all happened this year or not. But these were all fights that I kept seeing people talking about. Okay, back to the list. So let's do a couple Megalo Box fights. This one is the final fight, but it wasn't the most interesting for me, so I'm putting in B tier. This one I liked a lot more, and I'm putting A tier. I don't think it's going to get nominated. And then this one also is in B tier. This one is in B tier. They were all good fights, well executed, well animated. Just not necessarily stand out. Cherry versus Adam was a very good fight, but just because these two ended up being a lot more plot relevant, I think they're going to be more remembered. This was a cool fight. The Psycho Chick and Garfield, which I can remember his name because his name is Garfield. But it was a very cool fight. Very dynamic. Artwork is really cool. Legoshi's fight is B. It was all right. Not amazing, but pretty cool. Unlikely. Probably a never. At first, I was struggling to find fights, and then later I was like, oh, there's a lot of them. My Hero had a bunch of fights, but not necessarily a lot of standout ones. I will put Shigaraki versus Stress Hulk in A tier. Redestro kind of was lacking because of the way they changed the backstory, so I don't think it's super likely. Unlikely. I'd go as far as to say there. Any more My Hero stuff? Nope. Okay. So we did the Warhammer versus Attack Titan. Zeke versus Levi was more fun in the manga, and it was still cool, but it wasn't as memorable, I think, as it was in the manga. So I'm putting it in B tier. The VV fights were all very technically pretty, but I don't know if they get nominated just because they were so quick. This fight was cool, but not necessarily super standout. This one, the animation was beautiful. This one was nice, but not necessarily a super interesting fight. dynamic-wise. This one, the dynamics were really cool, but the animation was awful, so I'm putting it here. Unlikely, or I guess unlikely. Unlikely, it's too one-sided. This was a cool fight, but not necessarily one that I think a lot of people are going to remember. Wonder Egg, I'm putting both of these impossible, but not necessarily likely. And for this one, it really stands for any Wonder Egg fight in that they were all very pretty and well executed. But again, Wonder Egg, I think, is going to not get a lot of nominations. I'll put the Jujutsu Kaisen fight up here in top 6. It was very good. These were pretty fights, but they weren't super interesting. This was a really pretty fight for what it was, but then it didn't really go anywhere. Not likely, very unlikely. Sure. I didn't see this one. I don't think I got to that one. And then the Naruto fight, I've heard a lot of good things about, even though I'm not caught up with Boruto. So this is kind of what we're looking at. A lot of these fights are more hard to define. Like these are the ones that these 6 are the ones where I feel like there was enough back and forth. There was a lot of narrative weight to each of these fights. There was very cool animation. But I think this is a pretty safe bet. Like, I would be very surprised if it's not these 6. But any of these I wouldn't be upset about. I would just be kind of surprised. But these 6, I feel like, were the standouts of the year, probably. Could maybe see Jujutsu Kaisen knocking the nomination just because it was partially this year, partially last year. But yeah, I think this is a pretty good list. We'll do anime films really quick. But this is supposed to be a new category. I had trouble with this one because I didn't know what all came out in the theaters this year, which is what I'm assuming they're going to be doing is the theatrical releases and not necessarily the other releases. Also, I'm just going to do the top 6, and then everything else is possible, but not necessarily as likely. Demon Slayer almost certainly will get a nomination. I would also say Eva almost certainly is getting a nomination. The rest, I'm not so sure about. So Violet, I think, would get the nomination. Belle, I would think, would get the nomination. Jose. Then Cynic in me thinks My Hero. But these 2 are also really good. So these are very likely. Gintama, I think, is just too underwatched. And then these 2, the Sailor Moon one, and then this. And then, honestly, it's hard because I don't know what came out this year versus what came out in the U.S. So it's hard to really do this category justice. But I think it's going to look something like this or one of these 2 replacing My Hero. But I think this is a pretty good likely. I'm not sure if Belle came out this year or if it came out like 2022. So it might get replaced if it didn't come out this year in the States. But yeah, that's pretty much the movies. Not a lot to say on that. And then anime. So there's a lot of categories for this one. If it loads for me. There's a lot of categories. So I'm just going to go. I've already done some of these lists. So let's see if I still have them. So some of these I think I made before I had all the tiers, but these are also tentative. So I think some of them might have changed by the time I got there. So best directing, I think this one's mostly safe. I'd move this one down. And I'd move up Vivi. Yeah, let's do the actual tiers. Yeah, it's fine. So we'll just look at this. So that was best directing, best character design. I'm getting lazy at this point. This video's gone on a pretty long time. So I think best character design, Odd Taxi and Wonder Egg, clear standouts. And then the rest, I'm like pretty sure, but like it's kind of hard. I think Talked actually might be more likely than Horimiya, just because Horimiya has such basic designs, but they're unique designs, I guess, is what I was thinking. Skate's a very good one. Sunny Boy, very likely. Yeah, we'll see. I think I was a little too narrow in my view on some of these, but we'll see. Best animation. Do I agree with this? Yeah. I might move Ranking of the Kings up one, in which case I guess I'd probably get rid of Talked. But no, actually I'd probably get rid of Komi. Komi had really nice animation when it needed to, but wasn't like always amazing animation, while Ranking of the King was really great animation all the way through. These were made a little bit ago, so that's why they say tentative. Best opening. This one is complicated, so My War, probably for sure. Horimiya, I really liked and was very unique. Odd Taxi is an almost guaranteed. Pink Blood was. These were all very good. These were all good. I think this one in particular is a standout. I do think Tokyo Revengers could be more up here just because the song itself is really good, but I didn't think the animated bits with it were standout enough. But I could definitely see it getting nominated. Yeah. It's a pretty tough category. I actually might switch out Skates and Komi just because I think Komi's ended up being more iconic just because Komi ended up being more popular, but we'll see. So that's best openings, best ending. Best ending was hard this year. I don't think there's a lot of super standout ones. Yeah, this looks pretty decent. Pretty good. Yeah, I think this is more or less how I would put it. Yeah. Yeah, that looks fine to me. Top score. Score is hard for me. I don't usually listen to the scores very often, so I probably miss some obvious ones. But this is what I remembered as far as score. Megalo Box. If there was one thing Nomad should get, it's score. The score was amazing. But everything else, it's like it was good, not necessarily standout. Vivi and Talked have an unfair advantage because they're both musical animes. Mushoku Tensei had some good music throughout. It's a tough category for me to rank, though, so I may miss a very obvious one, and I apologize. And then best anime. This is a tentative list. Oh yeah, I only did 5, so I would move Ranking of the King up from possible to top 6 because I was really early on. I would probably move Wonder Egg down just because there's been such negative talk on Wonder Egg. I don't think it would get nominated. Who would I move up though? Probably Vivi. Probably be Vivi and To Your Eternity, take out Wonder Egg. Komi, I could see not being nominated, but like also I don't know what would get nominated instead. So I think this is a pretty, maybe Horimiya, but so I think this is a pretty good list, even though I didn't quite finish. But yeah, so those are my lists. Tell me in the comment section if there's anything I missed. Tell me what you want to see for the anime awards. And yeah, I am done with this. Have a great day. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm going to be trying to do more videos, but I'm really bad about sitting down and recording. So we'll see what happens.